Hi, my name is Slush, and I like The Legend of Korra.
This is a Girl Scout meeting.
Is it? Or is it that you girls can't admit you have a problem?
People generally tend to dislike Korra a lot, and I'm not gonna pretend I don't know why, especially if you compare it to The Last Airbender. The characters are more annoying, things don't always wrap up in the most satisfying ways, they rewrite history, Season 2 exists for some reason. The show makes it hard for us Legend of Korra fans to defend it sometimes. It's okay, we can admit it, guys. The show isn't perfect. But in spite of all of that, I genuinely think that The Legend of Korra is a good show. In fact, I think it's a very good show. It just takes a little while to get there. Now, I'm pretty sure that most of you guys are just clicking on this video because you agree with the title and want some internet guy to echo chamber your opinions, so I'll keep this next part short. But it's kind of hard to talk about Korra without talking about Nickelodeon first. This is gonna sound like I'm making excuses, and that's because I am, but to put this in terms that you understand, long ago, the many fans of Avatar lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when Stop. We're not doing this. It's just too obvious. I'm not doing it. People like to blame the flaws of Korra on the writing team being different than the previous show, but I actually think it has a lot more to do with Nickelodeon. When The Legend of Korra started, it was only supposed to be a one-season miniseries. That's why the story in season 1 is self-contained and why it looks so cinematic compared to the other seasons, because Nickelodeon gave the show more money thinking it would be a one-and-done deal. But Nickelodeon is stupid because The Last Airbender is the best piece of TV ever created, and obviously, fans of the show will consume any piece of media that they can as long as it comes from the same universe. Okay, everything but that. Naturally, season 1 of Korra ended up being super popular, so the execs decided to renew the show for one more season, which is why season 2 is also a self-contained storyline. Now, some people think that being self-contained is the reason why season 2 sucks, but it's not. Because if you look closely at the original scripts, you'll notice right here that the writing is fucking terrible. I mean, come on guys, Spirit Mechs? Really? Yeah, that one's not on Nickelodeon. But season 2 of Korra still had amazing viewership, and so finally, the Nickelodeon execs decided to do something good and gave Korra 2 more seasons, which is where the show really came into its own and achieved the level of greatness that I feel justifies calling it overhated. Now, I hear what you're saying. Why the f does any of that matter? Korra is either a good show or it's not. The context is irrelevant. And you're right, technically it doesn't matter. But it was fun to listen to, right? Okay, fine, I just wanted to bias you a little bit towards my opinion. Just a little bit. I'll stop now, I'll stop stalling. I'll tell you why the show is good. Now, obviously, in a general sense, I think it's a pretty good show. The storylines, Korra as a character, the stuff that happens, I'm generally pretty for it. But there are a few things that The Legend of Korra does really well, and arguably even better than The Last Airbender. One of those things would be how the show handles its geopolitics, which obviously is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think it really enhances the show. The last show had the 4 nations divided by element. This show starts the globalization process with Republic City. We get to see the pros and cons of a multicultural society in the Avatar world, how it lends itself to cool new ideas like pro-bending and technology, while also bringing in new problems like more powerful gangs and citizen inequality.
Are you tired of living under the tyranny of benders?
That whole first season revolves around the idea that non-benders want to have a political voice, and that makes for some pretty interesting world building and storylines. We see how the 4 nations navigate their relationship with Republic City and other foreign affairs. We see how new forms of division are created in the post-war world. We see how I can't go more than 30 seconds without making another Simpsons reference.
How long was that?
There's always a political component to everything that's unfolding in the plot, and the writers do a great job of making it feel accurate to the universe they've created. When the leader of a nation is brutally murdered, things don't just go back to normal when the villain is defeated. It creates a power vacuum that gets filled by a militant dictator. I think that's pretty cool. And what I really love is that for Korra, having to overcome these political extremist villains who pull her in every which direction leads her to deeper character growth. It forces her to question her own beliefs about what's best for the world, and as she comes to understand the world around her better, she starts to understand herself better too, which is just really fucking dope, and I love that she gains wisdom in such a realistic way throughout this show. Like take season 1 for example. Even though technically the villain is Amon and the Equalists, in a way you could say that she's really fighting against political corruption, which come in the form forms of Amon and Tarlok, who represent both sides of the political spectrum. And as she loses that battle, it shakes her confidence in being the Avatar, which causes her to desperately seek guidance. Then in season 2, this dumbass leads Korra towards spirituality, which eventually leads her to literally finding herself, and that ends up helping her let go of the expectations that she places on herself for being the Avatar. Hence why season 3 is such a journey, because it's mirroring Korra's own journey of self-discovery. A lot of people think that Korra is a terrible character and that she never evolves, but they're dumb, because I disagree with them. In the first season, Korra is a pompous bully whose self-worth is tied to her status as the Avatar. By season 4, she believes in non-violent solutions and has learned to love herself beyond any label. Plus, there's like a pretty huge PTSD arc in there that like teaches her to let go of fear.
Let it play out.
I can't!
You can. Accept what happened to you. Don't fear what might have been.
I have no control!
Don't be afraid. Hold on.
By the way, speaking of Zahir, season 3 is like the last airbender levels of good, and it's largely because of him. Whoever thought of making Zahir an airbending villain is a genius. Because between the original show and Tenzin and his family, we have so much goodwill built up for airbenders that seeing one on the other side is both exciting and almost shocking. Plus, the way Zahir kills people is so sadistic and brutal.
You think freedom is something that you can give or take on a whim. But to your people, freedom is just as essential as air.
Best villain. Best villain. But it's not just Zahir. Season 3 really has everything. It's got a great group of villains, a big multi-destination adventure, fun moments from so many different characters, incredible fight scenes, the storylines tie together in the end, and of course the ending leads perfectly into the start of the next season. It's the perfect Korra season. And season 4 is almost just as good, but it has a rush finale, which, you guessed it, is a result of Nickelodeon execs. And by the way, just because the first 2 seasons aren't as good as the last 2, that doesn't mean they don't still have some moments in the sun either. Yeah, I don't love the implications of Rava as a character, but I'm not gonna act like the Avatar 1 stuff isn't great television. And season 1 may have its issues, but I thought that Amon was a legitimately scary villain. The idea of losing your bending is terrifying. Besides, all of that Equalist stuff is still surprisingly relevant today.
I'm not oppressing anyone. You're oppressing yourself.
That didn't even make sense!
Like, remember that time when Twitter discovered Korra and thought that Amon was the good guy? That was pretty telling. And man, the way they finally kill off Amon is pretty crazy.
It will be just like the good old days.
I know it's not really a big deal, but I gotta admit that I do like that they're willing to show actual death scenes in Korra. Oh, and you know what Korra actually does do better than Last Airbender? The music. The music in this show is incredible. It's so epic and sentimental and heart-wrenching. Jeremy Zuckerman should be given an award for his work here. And tell him that he did a good job on that Scream show too. Now, this is usually where YouTubers would go into the negative parts of the show they're reviewing so that you, the audience, are getting a balanced and nuanced take on the content being discussed. But that. Why would I start listing off the bad parts of the show when I'm trying to make the case that it's overhated? I mean, I already threw you a bone. I said that season 2 sucks and that the characters are annoying. I don't need to give you more than that. Plus, then I'd have to do more thinking and writing, and the video would be like twice as long, and I'm really trying to post more frequently these days. The point is that even if The Legend of Korra is a flawed show, which it totally is, and even if it can't really stand up to The Last Airbender, which it can't, that doesn't mean that it's an all-around bad show either. There are so many little accomplishments in writing, directing, music, and world building that makes Korra a worthwhile show to watch. It can really be a beautiful show at times. And it can also be very exciting, funny, and deep too. But unfortunately, it can also be sloppy, rushed, or even downright annoying at times. And as people, we tend to gravitate towards the negatives over the positives. We compare Korra to its near-perfect predecessor and leave with disappointment instead of comparing it to an average show and leaving with contentment. But I don't want to do that, because when I see how much good the show has to offer, it makes me want to appreciate it that much more. So if you want to hear a video about all the bad parts of Korra, I'm sure you know exactly where to find that. But me, I'm gonna focus on the good parts and be happy with what I've got.